Who is in and who is out of the lineup for Game 2 for the New York Rangers? We debate, and we also go over a couple of encouraging signs from Game 1 and talk about something that the Rangers must do in Game 2.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1074 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for being Locked On New York Rangers, your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. With any winning $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So obviously the Rangers didn't get the result in Game 1. They now face a series deficit for the first time in this entire postseason run. And a big Game 2, obviously, now coming up. Rangers going to look to even this series for what it's worth, because, I did see some Ranger fans, obviously, somewhat divided as far as, how they played in Game 1 and what the problems were. And, were they dominated by the Panthers? Were they not ready to go? I don't think that was the case at all. And for what it's worth, Laviolette seemed to share those sentiments. I believe the exact term that he used was that it was a fairly even Game 1, and I happen to agree. I would give a slight edge to the Panthers, but nothing like otherworldly. And as I mentioned in our last episode, a couple of inches this way or that way on a couple of shots by the Rangers that hit the post, and we're talking about Game 1 in a whole different light, and the Rangers very likely get the win in that case. But I wanted to start today's episode by talking about some of the encouraging things that I saw from Game 1, some things that, give me hope and leave me feeling optimistic as it pertains to the Rangers' chances of winning Game 2. Like I said, we're also going to get into some lineup decisions. Should Matt Rempe be back in the lineup? We'll talk about that and a couple of other things as well. And finally, also going to discuss whether something big that the Rangers need to do in Game 2. And like I said, we'll get to all that fun stuff in due time. But for starters, a couple of encouraging signs, not in any specific order here, just things that give me some hope and have me feeling good for Game 2. First of all, I felt like the Rangers in Game 1 pretty much absolutely kept the Panthers' star players in check. Now, of course, the Panthers did end up winning this game 3-0, but you got to remember, one of the goals was an empty netter. The other was a situation where Lafreniere, obviously on accident, put the puck into his own net. But for the most part, again, the Rangers in Game 1 kept the Panthers' star players in check. Their offense, as far as traditional goals scored, not counting the own goal, not counting the empty net goal, their entire offense, as far as lighting the lamp, was Matthew Tkachuk scoring on a shot from pretty far away. In the first period, fairly late in the first period. I believe there were about 3 or 4 minutes to go in the opening stanza when Tkachuk scored. You had Verhaeghe and Forsling with the assist on the play. And of course, Verhaeghe also got credited with the goal that went off of Lafreniere and into the net a little bit later in the game. But, for all the talk about how, the Rangers star players, they didn't do enough and they have to do more. And there is some truth to that. I think some of the Ranger star players had some fairly quiet nights and in some cases, some subpar performances by their own lofty standards. But for everybody that was saying that, can somebody please explain to me, what the Panther star players did in this game that was so impressive? Like I said, their only traditional goal, quote unquote, in this game was scored by Tkachuk. And I mean, credit where it's due, they all count, right? But that's a goal that I feel like Igor Shesterkin probably would have wanted back. He was screened a little bit by Adam Fox on the play. Not sure that he got a clean look at it, but the shot was from far enough away. It's just the kind of stop that you expect Igor Shesterkin to make. He wasn't able to do that. Tkachuk gets the goal. But other than that, where's all the offense from all the big-time, star players on the Florida Panthers? It was basically non-existent, and I think part of the reason why it was non-existent is because the Rangers defended very well in this game, and I think, that's we're kind of leading into number 2 here. The Rangers played overall good team defense in this one. Igor Shesterkin obviously made some tough saves when he had to, but for the most part, I thought the Rangers, against the Panther star players specifically, but really the entire Panther team as a whole, they defended well and they limited high danger scoring opportunities. And that being the case, obviously, that's something that's very encouraging. The Rangers never really allowed the Panthers to get going. I believe the Panthers were also 0-for-3 on their power play, so the Ranger PK continues to fire on all cylinders. But again, for everybody that's all upset about the Rangers star players not doing enough, what did the Panthers do offensively that just wowed everybody? I mean, okay, they slightly outshot the Rangers. The final tally was 27-24, but I didn't see a ton of high danger scoring chances for the Panthers. And on top of that, I think that Sergei Bobrovsky had to make more challenging saves in this game than did Igor Shesterkin. And, you'd have to go back and tally them all up. I know, Steve Valiquette does those charts, clear sight analytics, where, he classifies every scoring chance as high danger, medium danger, low danger, whatever it might be. But the bottom line, I'd have to look at that. I'd be curious to see what numbers he came up with for this one. But bottom line, I didn't see a lot of quality chances for the Panthers, and I think that bodes well for the Rangers going forward. Like I said, I think they did a nice job handling the Panthers star players. Another reason why I'm encouraged, and this one's more just kind of a gut feeling, but I feel like the puck luck was not on the Rangers side at all in game 1. And I feel like that kind of has a way of evening itself out throughout the course of a best-of-7 series. And to kind of recap what I was talking about, we mentioned this in the last episode, but as far as puck luck is concerned, Rangers hit 2 posts. And like I said a minute ago, if both or either one of those shots is, an inch this way or a half inch that way, there's a very good chance that the Rangers end up winning that game. And that's not an exaggeration. It really was that fine of a line there. And of course, the Panthers, as we mentioned, also scored a goal that went off the stick of Alexis Lafreniere. So, puck luck, it's not an easy thing to predict. It's next to impossible to predict, but it's been fairly evenly distributed in Ranger playoff games thus far throughout their run. They'll see them get a little bit of a bounce and score a goal, or that they get a little bit of a bounce and against them and the other team scores a goal, whatever the case might be. But again, this one is mostly a gut feel, but I just get the feeling that game 2, the temperature is going to rise. You're going to see a lot more, nastiness in the crease and whatnot. And I get the feeling that the Rangers could be the beneficiary of, a lucky bounce going their way rather than every possible bounce going against them the way it did in game 1. I just feel like that stuff has a way of evening itself out. And you might see a dirty goal where there's a lot of traffic in front of Bobrovsky and a couple of guys crashing the net. It bounces off of one of our guys. It bounces off of one of their guys, and it ends up in the net. Look for a dirty goal for the Rangers in game 2. And, keep in mind that there could be some low-scoring games in this series. Both teams defend very well. Both teams very strong on the penalty kill. And obviously, both teams have world-class goalies. So I look for the Rangers to get a dirty goal and at least one bounce going their way in game 2, in stark contrast to game 1, where none of the bounces went their way. And speaking of bounces, one more reason I'll throw at you guys here. The Rangers bounce back. This is something that I've gone back to for pretty much the entire season. And it's not just blind faith, on my part, thinking like, oh yeah, the Rangers, they'll win just because, they're due for a win. You see the evidence pile up throughout the entire regular season and now in the playoffs as well. When the Rangers at times haven't been their best, or they're coming off of a tough loss, wherever the case might be there, they tend to answer the bell and come back strong in the next one. We've seen the Rangers respond to some tough losses. We saw it against the Canes. Game 6, obviously, big response there after losing game 5. And throughout the regular season, some of their worst performances of the season were followed by some of their best performances of the season. And again, I don't think they were dreadful in game 1, but this is another chance for them to test their mettle, test their resolve. And I think that this team has shown time and time again that they are up to that challenge when it presents itself. And this is the first time that, again, they've been down in a playoff series. So it's a little bit different than the regular season. Obviously, playoffs are a whole different monster. But as we've seen from this team all year, they do tend to answer the bell when they have to. And I think they're going to understand and recognize the importance of at least getting the split at home before they head on the road for games 3 and 4. And I do think that they'll bounce back and once again respond to the bell as they've been doing for virtually the entire season. So a couple of encouraging things if people are kind of down on the Rangers or just nervous or, whatever it might be, however you might be feeling. Hopefully, maybe that alleviates some of your concerns. Maybe not. It's the playoffs and we're all a little bit different, as fans, the way we watch these games, the way we respond to these things that happen. But, we saw the Rangers answer the bell time and time again. We saw it in the last years against the Canes. I think we see it again here in game 2 against the Panthers. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to shift our attention to some big lineup decisions that the Rangers are going to have to make. Who's in the lineup? Who's out of the lineup? How do they look to line up against the Panthers in game 2? And we'll get to that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that is the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. We streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. I want to, like I said, shift our attention to an ongoing debate among Ranger fans, and that is who's in the lineup, who's out of the lineup for game 2, who should be playing with who, and all that good stuff. I did want to mention real quick, though, for the everydayers, this is just our 4th episode of the week, despite the fact that it's Friday. We missed an episode on Tuesday. Going to make it up for you guys with an episode on Saturday. And obviously that episode will recap everything that happens in game 2 between the Rangers and the Panthers. But with all that said, let's go ahead and talk about the lineup decision. And let me also reemphasize just how nice it is that the Rangers have these decisions to make. And they do have some depth, and they do have some forwards that, a lot of guys you can make a case for deserve to be in the lineup, should be in the lineup. Obviously, there is a little bit of a numbers crunch, and there's only so many spots, for forwards and defensemen and what have you. But, it is nice that they have a couple of different options that you can at least feel good about. So this is what I'm doing if I'm the Rangers and I'm making these lineup decisions for the next game. And there was a lot to consider here. But after some careful consideration, I'm going to leave the top 6 the way that it's been, at least how it mostly has been. We saw in game 1, the Rangers were struggling for a little while to create some offense, and they did shuffle the deck a little bit. We saw a very brief kid line reunion. We saw Philip Hedl with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. I believe Kako at one point was down on the 4th line. But a couple of reasons I'm keeping the top 6 together. First of all, we'll go to the Rangers' second line, which is really their top line, Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere. I simply cannot mess with this. It's just been too good all season. And statistically speaking, it is one of the absolute best lines in the NHL. That is not an exaggeration. That's just a fact. They've been that good. And despite them having a rough night in terms of being on the ice for a couple of goals against, they did create some scoring chances. And Trocheck and Lafreniere both out there playing very physical hockey as well. I thought that line was probably the Rangers' best line on the night. So we're going to leave them together. And the other line in the top 6, whether you consider it the top line, the second line, or however you feel about it, Kreider, Mika, Jack Roslovic. So I thought about maybe putting Philip Hedl there. With Roslovic, it's interesting because he is on that top line, or what's at least listed as the top line for the Rangers with Mika and Kreider. And I do think he's done better there than just about everybody else that they've tried there at one time or another throughout the course of this entire season. But it always feels like he's on kind of shaky ground there. And you can understand why. I mean, it's late in a game. You're down by a goal. You want to double shift Panarin, or you might want to give Philip Hedl a chance there as well to kind of jolt the line a little bit. But it always feels like Roslovic is like this close to losing his spot on that line. But, he wasn't great in game 1. But then again, nobody on the Rangers, I would say, was fantastic in game 1. Again, I don't think anybody was terrible in the first game of this series. It's just one of those games where everybody can be a little bit better. And I don't think the loss falls on any 1 or 2 players. But with that said, for all those reasons, I'm not taking Jack Roslovic off of that line. You also combine the fact that Roslovic made some big plays in game 6 against the Canes. 2 secondary assists where you can make the case that neither of the 2 goals happened. They were both goals by Chris Kreider. Neither of them would have happened if not for Jack Roslovic making some tough plays, keeping the play alive, some good passes there from Jack Roslovic. So for all those reasons, I'm leaving Jack Roslovic there. I don't see the need to, set him down the lineup or whatever the case might be. It's interesting saying all this because here I am vouching for Roslovic and saying that, he should keep his spot on what is considered to be the Rangers' top line. Something else that's also on the table, though, is Roslovic being a healthy scratch in the next game. It's not what I would do, but I think it is something that's at least an option, and we'll elaborate on that in just a little bit. But for me, I'm leaving the top 6 the same. For the third line, we're going to do something a little bit different here. We are going to move, these are my lines, and believe me when I tell you, the Rangers have not asked for my opinion, but this is what I'm going to go with. So I think Barclay Goodrow has really played well in these playoffs. And one thing you look at is the 5 points and 3 goals. I think he only had like 3 or 4 goals in the regular season. That's all well and good, but in general, I just think Barclay Goodrow is out there grinding every night. It looks like he very rarely has a bad shift. He goes to work on the forecheck. He does some of the dirty work for this team. He obviously kills penalties. He's had a couple of, in addition to the 3 goals, a couple of instances where he's been pretty close to scoring what could be considered a dirty goal, where he's in the crease fighting for the puck or making a strong drive to the net. We've seen a lot of good stuff from Barclay Goodrow throughout this postseason run here. So I'm moving Barclay Goodrow to the third line. We're going to stick him very tentatively on the left wing for the third line. At center, we're going to put Philip Hedl there. And at right wing, we'll leave Kaapo Kakko in that spot, the spot that he's been in for most of this playoff run here. You could always flip-flop Goodrow and Philip Hedl. And honestly, that's probably what I would do. I would prefer Goodrow at center over Hedl, and you put Philip Hedl on the left wing. But it seems like whenever Goodrow and Hedl have been on the same line, you get Goodrow at wing and Hedl at center. That's the Rangers' decision. I'm not going to die on that hill anymore. I like Hedl better as a winger. The Rangers, for the most part, though, over the last few years, have put him at center. But regardless, those are my 3 guys on the third line: Goodrow, Hedl, and Kakko. And I just like the fact that Goodrow on that line can go in and do some of the dirty work that we just talked about, dig some pucks out of the corner, and maybe try to set up Kakko or Hedl for some scoring chances. Hedl continues to be an X factor because game to game, we just don't know what his status is going to be. I mean, is he back in the lineup for good at this point? Is it touch and go for every single game? We're not sure. The Rangers do play it close to the vest there. But assuming that Hedl is healthy and all systems are go, give me him on the third line with Barclay Goodrow and also Kaapo Kakko. Fourth line, we're going to go from left to right here: Cooley, Wenberg, and Rempe. So Rempe is the only guy that I'm putting in the lineup that was not in the lineup the game before. And, Rempe, already a very polarizing Ranger. I mean, how many games has he played now? Like 22 or 23, including the regular season and the postseason. I'm kind of in the middle with Rempe. I do think there is something to be said for somebody that can go out there and really kind of electrify the crowd and give the boys a little bit of a boost by throwing his weight around out there and imposing his will. We can talk about X's and O's and all that good stuff, but hockey, a big part of it is imposing your will on your opponent, and Matt Rempe does that about as well as any player on the Rangers, at least from a physical standpoint, and somebody that kind of strikes some fear into the heart of his opponents. Now, you'll also notice that the guy that I dropped down from the third line to the fourth line is Alex Wenberg. Wenberg, to me, just doesn't have enough offense to be playing a top 9 role. I know he's a very good defensive forward, for the most part. He can go out there and kill penalties as well. I don't need to see him in a top 9 role anymore. He had a couple of chances on the same shift to tie the game in game 1 against the Panthers, had 2 shots at the net. The net was kind of open. Bobrovsky was scrambling, and he just can't put the puck in the net. So I'm kind of over it with Wenberg in the top 9. I'm not giving up on him in general. I recognize that he plays a specific role for this team and that he does have some value, but I'm good at this point with him not being in the top 9 anymore. So drop Wenberg down to the fourth line here. And look, if you're in a situation where it's the third period, the Rangers have a 1-goal lead, and they're trying to hang on to it, the final, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever you want to do, you can always at that point move Wenberg back into his spot on the third line, and maybe you move Hedl down. Make sure Wenberg gets ice time in a situation like that for the Rangers. But for the most part in this game, I'm good with Wenberg now being on the fourth line. And you'll also notice that something I did here was I left Jimmy Vesey out of the lineup. It kills me to do that. Jimmy Vesey goes out there and works his tail off every single game. I think he has some value. He can give you some offense in the bottom 6 every now and then. And obviously, he's a big part of the penalty kill. I'm going to take my chances there, though. Obviously, the Rangers will be down one of their penalty killing forwards, but you've still got 5 guys that you feel good about. And really, Vesey, he's not usually the first forward onto the ice when the Rangers are trying to kill a penalty. They go to Mika and Kreider. They go to Goodrow and Trocheck out there. And then I believe Wenberg is usually on the ice with Vesey, but you can get by with 5 forwards instead of 6 when it comes to killing penalties. And I suppose if you need a 6, you can always throw out, I guess you could try Kako there. Doesn't have a ton of experience killing penalties, but it's not foreign to him either. Really, I think you can go with those 5 forwards that I just mentioned, and you'll probably be just fine. As far as other guys that, in theory could be options, Blake Wheeler, he's off the IR now. I guess technically he could be an option, but for me, Wheeler at this point is just too much of a wild card. He's a 37-year-old who's coming off of a pretty devastating injury. Now, could that give the team a boost? It sounds like he's a very popular player in that locker room. We saw after one of the overtime wins, I believe it was game 3 against the Canes, he's there against the glass. The Rangers are celebrating, and he's pounding on the glass, and he's in the tunnel there, and he's high-fiving everybody as they go by him. It looks like he's really enjoying himself and having a blast being back around the team. And credit to him for working his way back and getting cleared. But I just can't, you look at the logjam there and all the different Ranger forwards, I just feel like that's too much of a roll of the dice. Blake Wheeler clearly does not have the mobility that he once did. And, you're talking about somebody that, again, had that really rough injury months ago, hasn't played in months. It's an option, but it's just not one that I really want to see the Rangers do. We'll see if they feel otherwise. It's at least possible that he's out there. We shall see. Johnny Brodzinski, we've seen him play a couple of playoff games. I just feel like at this point, he's probably on the outside looking in. There's just too many guys in front of him at this point where I just don't expect to see him. And Adam Edstrom, I don't think there's any chance whatsoever. Nothing against Edstrom, but very limited experience. You're not going to see him just get thrown out there in the Eastern Conference Final to make his debut. At least I don't think so. And then the defensemen, and we'll keep it a little bit briefer here. There's less to discuss here, but same 6 defensemen. They've been going with the same 6 guys night in and night out. I know that Adam Fox is compromised right now, but as I mentioned in the last episode, unless he's at the point where he can't even skate, I think you have to roll the dice with one of your top players and somebody that obviously has been a huge part of this team for a long time and continues to be a big part of them going forward. He's not at his best right now, but you give him a chance. You have to roll with your big guys at this point in the year, and Adam Fox is definitely one of the premier players on the Rangers, as everybody is well aware. The only other thing I'll mention as far as the defensemen, I'm going to leave it the same, same 6 guys and the same 3 pairings, but I do want the Rangers to keep that Miller and Schneider pairing and the Gustafsson-Trouba pairing kind of in their back pocket. If things go a little bit sideways or whatever the case might be there, you can always go back to that. They did move up Trouba with Miller for game 6 against the Canes, and obviously it worked. And, we'll see. We'll see what they look to do, but that's just an idea that I think, they should at least keep handy if they want to go back to, once again, Miller, Schneider, and then Trouba and Gustafsson. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to finish today's episode by talking about something specific that I think the Rangers really need to do going into the next game, and we will get to that in just a second. All right, we want to go ahead, take a minute, and let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right, let's go ahead and close out today's episode by talking about something very simple, yet something that I think is very important for the Rangers in Game 2. You need a fast start, and more specifically, you need to score first in this game. Now, on one hand, you could take what I just said right there and copy and paste it and apply it to literally any hockey team, not just NHL team, literally any hockey team at any level, and say, okay, this is important and this is one of the keys to this game. I get it. But I do feel, given the Rangers' current situation and given their opponent, this is more important in Game 2 than it typically is. It's more important now than in some random regular season game against, the Coyotes or the Sharks or something like that. It's more important, I would say, even earlier in the playoffs against the Caps and the Canes. And, no disrespect to those teams, but I think the Panthers are better than both of them. I mean, I know they're better than the Caps, but you always felt like you could bounce back if you didn't score first against one of those teams. Against the Panthers, I mean, look, if the Rangers don't score first in game 2, is it a death sentence? No. If the Rangers do score first in game 2, does it guarantee victory? Also no. But again, I do feel like it's more important than it typically is for a couple of reasons. For starters, the aforementioned series deficit that the Rangers now face, having lost game 1, they are now down 1-0 in the best of 7. So that just amplifies everything, makes everything just a little bit bigger. And obviously, you need to get off to a fast start if you're going to get this series tied. And certainly you don't want to begin a best of 7 by losing the first 2 at home. It's not insurmountable, but you are starting to dig a hole if you do that. The other big thing, as far as like a reason why the Rangers need to score first, the Panthers, and this goes back to what I was kind of hinting at just a minute ago, they have you right in the palm of their hand, and they thrive when they are playing with the lead. And you could see that in game 1 because the Rangers were only down 1-0 for a huge chunk of that game. And there were just too many, periods of hockey, not literal periods like the first period, second period, but just different sequences in the game, different chunks of the game where it just felt like the Rangers could not get anything going. And the Garden was kind of quiet, which leads me into another reason why the Rangers must score first. You have to electrify the fans a little bit. The start of game 1, you got John Brancy out there doing the national anthem, and he does a fantastic job. And there were people there in attendance, and even the beat writers saying this arena feels like it's shaking right now. That place is absolutely electric. But to really get them going and really keep them going and keep them engaged and keep them loud and keep them fired up throughout the entire game, go out and start fast and go out and get that first goal. That crowd was looking for a reason to come unglued early in that game. And they came alive toward the end of the game as well. When the Rangers started buzzing, looked like they were going to get the equalizer on a couple of different occasions. It didn't happen. But again, to get this crowd, revved up and truly enjoy the home ice advantage that you earned by having the best record in the NHL all season, you got to score first. You got to get an early one against this Panther team. And to go into a little bit more detail on everything I just mentioned there, again, down 1-0, trailing in a series for the first time during this playoff run. Everything is bigger. And I do see some people debating, like, is this a true must-win game for the Rangers or not? To me, every playoff game is a must-win game because it preserves our sanity as Ranger fans. If the Rangers get up in a series, continue to build on their series lead, and just win and win and win, I don't think you can ever really take your foot off the gas in the playoffs. Like, if the Rangers had won game 1, will we look at this game like, well, it's not that important. If they lose, it's still 1-1. Who really can? No, we're not going to think that way. We're going to think, oh, they got to go out there and they got to win both these games at home and hold serve. Obviously, they can no longer do that. But the next best thing they can do is get this series tied and, feel good heading back to Florida for game 3. And with all that said, this game that the Rangers are playing right now, I would say it's the most important game that they've played so far in the playoffs. Maybe game 6 against the Canes, because you certainly didn't want to see that series go 7 games. But this is probably, at least right now, now that the Canes series is over, you can say this is the biggest game of the Ranger season. They need to treat it as such. And a fast start and the first goal, that's going to go a long way, I think, for the Rangers to even this series. Something else I just mentioned a second ago, getting the first goal very obviously gets the crowd going in this game for the Rangers. There were times in game 1 where the crowd was just a little bit too quiet. You consider the stage and everything going on here. It's the Eastern Conference Final. It's a 1-goal game, and there were times where it kind of sounded like a church in there. And I'm not, disrespecting the fans or anything like that. That's just kind of the way that the game flowed. I think the Panthers did a really nice job, getting their forecheck going, keeping the Rangers pinned in their zone for, large portions of that game, the game 1. And you need to get the crowd going and get those vibes high and just, electrify the fans. We do know that players feed off of the energy of the hometown crowd. And I think obviously getting the first goal, that's a great way to do exactly that. And as I mentioned, the Panthers, they thrive when they are playing with a lead. And something to kind of back that up. I forget the exact stat here, but they did mention on ESPN, which I know it's ESPN, but they did a good job kind of, explaining the Panthers and how they fare in different periods throughout the playoff run here. Far and away, the Panthers' worst period of the playoffs is the first period. They, like the Rangers, seem to get better as the game goes on throughout this entire playoff run here. That's what good championship teams do. But I do think you have a little bit of a chance if you're the Rangers to not necessarily catch them flat-footed, but get them early and take a lead before the Panthers can really get into their game. Because, again, we saw 1-0. The crowd was kind of taken out of the game. There were times where the Rangers weren't doing a whole lot. And once it went 2-0, it felt like an insurmountable lead. But if you get the lead against this Panther team, you force them to kind of play your game a little bit. They can't, focus as much on defending as they did in game one. And I just feel like if the Rangers get the lead, they're going to start dictating how this game goes. Whereas it kind of felt like in game one, the Panthers were kind of dictating the terms of play, at least a little bit. Again, I don't think it was like this car crash disaster of a performance by the Rangers in game one, the way that certain fans do. Peter Laviolette, like I mentioned earlier, shares those sentiments. He said that he thought it was fairly even. But I think a way to really kind of flip the script here and turn the tables on the Panthers, you come out, you get that first goal, and you play fast-paced hockey, which, the Panthers don't really do that. They kind of a little bit of a different style than the Rangers, and you dictate terms to them in this game. And again, as I mentioned a minute ago, you can say that about any hockey game ever, that it's great to get the first goal and get a fast start. It's bigger than it probably has been, I would say, all season for the Rangers to do so in this game coming up. So, yeah, going to be huge. Hopefully the Rangers can get that first one, just hit the ground running. And like I said, dictate this game to the Panthers, just the way the Panthers sort of did to the Rangers in game one. But, again, listen, for everybody that's panicking right now, we knew this series was going to be a battle. We knew that it's the kind of, you never know for sure, right? But it's the kind of series that always, to me, felt destined to go 6 or 7 games. It very well still could do that. It's going to be a battle all the way through. And like I said, a couple of a little bit better puck luck, and maybe the Rangers are up 1-0. So hopefully, obviously, puck luck is on the Rangers' side for this next one. The only other thing I want to mention before we call it a day here is that Sam Rosen had a health scare the other day. Per Don LaGreca on the Michael Kay show, Sam Rosen was dealing with dizziness and went to the hospital because of it. Don LaGreca on the Michael Kay show mentioned that, Sam is doing okay. Full bill of health or a clean bill of health was the exact term that he used, and said that he's okay. But it does sound like Sam, who's been doing the games on the radio, is going to have to miss at least a couple of them coming up in this series. So all the best to Sam Rosen. Hope he gets well soon. But that will do it for today. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Big thanks to everybody that's gotten us over the 3,000 subscriber mark. And again, thank you guys as always, and I will see you next time.